You're listening to Souhan Unfiltered on the Alive and Social Network. My name is Sean Bernard. I'm certainly not Jim Souhan, but man, do I wish I was, because he's live from Phoenix at the Super Bowl. We've got Jim on the phone. How you doing, Jim?
First time in a long time somebody's actually complimented me by calling me live. I appreciate that.
He's got a pulse. He's got a pulse from Phoenix.
An intermittent pulse, yeah. It's to tell you what, I love my job. It's not always glamorous, but sometimes it is. You know, I mean, I'm pretty. It's funny. This starts a pretty good stretch for me. I get to be in Arizona for the Super Bowl, which is really cool, and then I get to go to spring training with the Twins, which is probably my favorite assignment of all. And then, of course, that's not my favorite assignment. My favorite assignment is going to the Masters. Well, opening day and then the Masters in the same week this year. Twins opening at Detroit and then going down to Augusta for the Masters. This is a pretty awesome stretch in which to do my job.
Oh, yeah, it's incredibly cool. I mean, for me, on my bucket list, the Masters is probably still number one. I have yet to go to the Masters. I'd love to do that at some point, but spring training, I've been down to spring training, but it's a little different from your point of view because you're in the clubhouse with the players and coaches and managers and everything, getting the inside scoop, which is great. So
yeah, I actually don't think I would enjoy spring training as a fan as much as most fans do, because I'm very picky about my baseball, and I don't like games where the starters come off in the third inning. I don't like games where you're watching some guy who's going to spend the year in AAA deciding it. I like the atmosphere of spring training, but the baseball is often pretty awful. I like spring training from a professional standpoint because it's just great access. People are in a great mood. You're in Florida for an extended period of time. I really I love spring training for all the selfish reasons. The Masters now, if I hadn't ever been to the Masters, then that would be probably number one on my bucket list. It is. I can't tell you how stunningly beautiful the grounds are. I mean, and what you don't get on TV is the dramatic elevation changes and just how beautiful the course is, even in areas where you never see a TV camera. I mean, there are like gullies between, let's say to the left of the first fairway and to the left of the second fairway, kind of that V area.
Yeah. I
mean, it's like an arboretum. It's just beautiful, lush foliage, flowers of every color. It's gorgeous. So my new bucket list number one, because I've been lucky enough to go to Augusta repeatedly, is the British Open. I've had so many people tell me that it's as good as Augusta, only completely different. It's brown. It's out. It's seaside usually. It's Brits walking around with funny accents, but they say that is one of the great sports experiences is to go cover a British Open.
Yeah, I've had friends travel to the British Open. They've said it's absolutely amazing. So it depends on where you are, whether you're doing it in England, Ireland, or Scotland. But apparently it's fantastic. So.
Yeah, well, I would love to see. I do want to cover at least one British Open. Maybe I do it next year in our run up to the Ryder Cup, because we're going to be covering Major League Golf like crazy next year, trying to preview that. That might be the one chance I get to do it as a professional. If I don't do that, then maybe later in my life I'll do kind of a quasi business trip and get over there and just see it for myself.
So tell me about what's the buzz down in Phoenix right now? Is it a zoo down there? Is it mayhem? Can you actually drive around, or is it just elbows to elbows?
Well, you can drive around most of Phoenix. I mean. Yeah. The thing is, it is a major city. So what they're doing is they're blocking off, I don't know how many square feet or whatever, but I would say about a 4 to 8 square block area of downtown Phoenix is all kind of, there are banners everywhere, and there are parties in the streets, and there's people trying to promote their product and give away Tostitos or whatever. There's a kind of a chunk of downtown that is really just reserved for NFL business, NFL parties, media, stuff like that. Now, the teams are staying way out in different suburbs. My only real experience dealing with the locals is going to dinner late last night after I get done writing. And I went to like a taco joint here. The vibe I got talking to the bartenders was, hey, it's cool to have a Super Bowl here, but it doesn't really affect us. It's always so interesting at the Super Bowl to see the worlds collide. You have two crazed fan bases that are willing to spend incredible money. I mean, Super Bowl tickets at this thing are going like $5, $10, $20,000 a ticket. It's
amazing.
Unbelievable. And and Seahawks and Patriots fans will pay it. So you have these incredibly passionate fans. You have the people who are here who just want their city to look good if it's in a place with a lot of civic pride. Phoenix is kind of weird because a lot of people who didn't grow up here, they just moved here for business or something. But I know, like when I covered the Super Bowl in Minneapolis in 1991, it was a huge point of civic pride for people to have visitors leaving Minneapolis saying they had a good time. And as far as I can tell, I think they pulled it off. I don't really get that vibe so much here in Phoenix. It's more just kind of, okay, that there's a big event and that's cool and it'll be over a few days. And I haven't gotten a lot of civic pride out of here.
Well, Phoenix is an odd place. I have great friends down there. I went to junior high and high school, but I was from here, and I was the classic guy that was from someplace else that couldn't wait to get back to that someplace else, which was Minnesota. And so my friends that I've talked to about the Super Bowl and the Phoenix Open being down there, they said, we just try to stay the hell away from all the mayhem. And it's a lot of out-of-towners that come in to enjoy it rather than a lot of the locals.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I would guess that a lot of Phoenicians were happy to maybe rent their apartment or their house out to somebody who would pay a lot of money to come stay here for a week. I know that's what everybody in Augusta, Georgia does, is just rent their place out during the Masters weeks and get the hell out. And this also does, and listen, I please don't take this as a complaint. I love the fact that I'm in Arizona in January. It's a great thing for me. I'm not complaining at all. But I still think that the Super Bowl should be in New Orleans I think that A, the Super Bowl should be in New Orleans every year, and B, the NFL should, after deciding to hold the Super Bowl in New Orleans every year, should renovate the Superdome and turn it into something other than a horrible little third world country buried on American soil.
Yeah. That's a great concept and a way to rebuild from Katrina and.
Yeah, well, and it'd be also very, very self-serving for the NFL because then they'd have a world-class facility that they knew was waiting for them, and they could dictate how it was used and when it was used, and they could take as much time as they wanted to get it ready for the Super Bowl. They could have events all week in it and all week after or whatever. And New Orleans is perfect for this because people you fly to New Orleans, you cab to wherever you're going in the downtown area, and you walk. You don't need a rental car. You rarely need cabs. There's a great restaurant in every corner. There's a great bar in every corner. There's history. You'd be helping renovate a major American city that we almost lost. I think it's just win-win-win to go there.
And the other side of it is that you have Mardi Gras right after the Super Bowl. I mean, literally about 10 days after the average Super Bowl. So you could stay in New Orleans from a few days before the Super Bowl all the way till after Mardi Gras and maybe check your liver into a different resort after that.
Well, it's funny because I have traveled to New Orleans a lot.
Yeah.
I've done a bunch of Super Bowls there. I've done some college football there. I've done a lot of Viking games there. I've gone there on vacation a few times. And about the only time I would not want to be in New Orleans is Mardi Gras week. Because I think Mardi Gras attracts people who look at the large crowds of drunk people and see an opportunity to steal or do some mayhem. Where I think the rest of the year in New Orleans, I think, you can't go in the wrong neighborhood, you can't go down the wrong street. But in general, if you still stay with crowds in well-lighted places, you're not going to have any trouble at all. They realize that their industry is tourism. They're not going to let tourists get hurt or ripped off. Mardi Gras is the one week I've heard you better be really careful.
Yeah, I think I've outgrown that. I've had friends that went down there about 10, 15 years ago, and I decided not to go on the trip at that point because my wife was pregnant with our first kid, and it was probably the best choice. So the thing I'd love to ask you as a music fan, as a musician and a music fan, is the music in New Orleans. Is it just incredible? Yeah,
and the cool thing is, let's face it, everywhere you go in America, there's some guy on the street corner with a guitar.
Yeah.
In New Orleans, that guy on the street corner with the guitar tends to be pretty damn good.
That's what I love. I love it when you go to a city, or even when I was in Ireland, same thing. You go to Galway and there'd be 10 different street performers in an 8-block area, and they were all stellar. You'd pay to see them play, which I did by throwing a euro in their guitar case. But Yeah, the music, I've heard the music's just incredible there, especially if you go a little out of the way and not as much to the mainstream joints.
Well, they're all they love live music. So there's live music everywhere. There's great blues, there's every form of music you want, but especially great blues. And the cool thing is, I'm not a big Bourbon Street guy. I love the neighborhoods. I love going over. I like a lot of the quieter parts of the French Quarter. I like going over to the Garden District. I love going and checking out. I'm not much of a ghoul hound, but I do like the cemeteries just because they're so historic and so unique. But you can find great music all over the place. And then if you are on Bourbon Street, the one thing I like about Bourbon Street is, three guys will just set up in the middle of the street and start playing. It'll be really good. Or it could be horns, it could be mandolins, it could be guitars, it could be any form of music. It is, and I remember when the Vikings played there in 2009 for the NFC Championship game, or technically 2010. I actually one of my columns was with a longtime New Orleans news side columnist, kind of a humor and scene columnist, who just wrote about what it was like to live in New Orleans. And he told me, it's an event city. Everybody wants to know, in most cities, you get done work on a Tuesday night and you go home and make dinner and go to bed. He said, New Orleans, what everybody asks after work every day is, who's playing? Who's playing? Somebody's playing somewhere and I'm going to go. People in New Orleans are just always looking for the next event.
It sounds like Austin, Texas, which is very similar. I lived there for a little while. I have two buddies down there that are rabid music fans, same thing. So when you're in the Phoenix area, I'm going to give you a couple of tips, and they've changed a lot since I grew up there, but the area around Sun Devil Stadium, I don't know if you spent much time in Tempe, but along...
Mostly for a couple of spring training trips I've been on.
Yeah, Mill Avenue, there's some great pubs over there that actually have a little bit of character, and you're going to hear some great live music in that area. That's one of my favorite spots. Now, it used to be... It's so funny. It parallels uptown Minneapolis. So, uptown used to be a little grungy. I mean, it used to be a little rough. Right. And it has changed. It was the same way in Tempe. It was kind of an interesting area, and they've cleaned it up a little bit, almost too much in my opinion. But some great clubs there to see some live music. So if if you can sneak away, I don't know how far that is from the hotel. Probably 20 minutes, I would guess, if you're near the stadium. Yeah,
it's amazing how little I do on the road these days. I tend to just kind of get my work done, but the one window you have for doing things during Super Bowl week is like Saturday night. There's just everything's already in the can, everything's already on the way, has already been sent to the paper. There's nothing more you can do. So Saturday night's probably my one night where I can get out and do something.
Well, that's good. That's good. So tell me a little bit about what you're hearing from other people in the media and what you've learned thus far from going to the media days.
I actually changed the way I've done this. My 10th Super Bowl, and I've covered a lot of other big events too. And I used to kind of go toward the light, toward the bright shining lights. And so, I think earlier in my career, I might have spent a lot of time around Doug Baldwin, angry Doug Baldwin, or angry Marshawn Lynch, or I might have spent more time trying to get some Patriots to answer questions about deflated footballs. But, what I've learned over the years is these guys are all really good about controlling what they're going to say and when they're going to say it. And you're not going to, ask a clever question that's suddenly going to make them say something they didn't want to say. So I've kind of gone away from the stereotypical Super Bowl week type story, and I just try to find somebody I'm interested in and try to have a reasonable conversation with them and get something, and lead them in an interesting direction. Now, like I'm going to write about Russell Wilson for the Sunday paper. You're not going to get anything in depth from Russell Wilson the week, because when he's available, he's going to be surrounded by 100 people, and everybody's going to be shouting one question at a time, and you're not going to have any kind of there's not going to be any train of thought. You're just going to have to hope that through the process he says something interesting. But I got to spend half an hour with Darryl Bevell this morning, and got to ask him a million different questions, and he kind of gave me some hints as to some things that are going on behind the scenes. He talked about his personal career, talked about coaching Brett Favre versus coaching Russell Wilson. That's kind of the thing I like to do these days is not just react to what everybody's reacting to, but go just find somebody I find interesting.
Well, the cool thing about that, from a reader /listener/fan standpoint is that, look, the Super Bowl isn't getting to the Super Bowl is not about Inflategate or Inflator-Gate or anything else. It's really about the fact that you got these guys who have been playing football since they were probably 7 or 8 years old, and they have the opportunity to play for the world championship in football, and so the most of the attention goes to a handful of players, or it goes to the major controversy. What I love about what you do and why I was a fan before you ever joined the network is that you will grab somebody like a Darrell Bevell and say, let's talk. Let's get some other questions out of the way, and let's go a little bit more in depth than maybe you're going to get with the the typical cliche lines from some of the main players.
Right, and the other, I kind of do two different things. I either try to write about I try to write local, which is Bevel qualifies. I try to write something that isn't overdone, which again Bevel kind of falls in that category. Or if you also do have to write about some of the big names that everybody else is writing about and who probably aren't going to be particularly interesting, and that's where you have to try to find a way to lend some perspective. It's like, I'm going to write about Russell Wilson for the weekend. He's not going to have a great quote, and there probably won't be an incredible quote on him. But if you spend some time with the stats and spend some time with football history, you can build a really interesting case about Russell Wilson. I mean, he's a chance. He's a guy who was drafted in the 3rd round, who a lot of people didn't think was big, tall enough to play in the NFL. And he has a chance to win 2 Super Bowls in his first 3 years in the NFL, which has never been done. And if you look at his stats are very similar to Tom Brady's the first 3 years. And the only real difference is that Russell Wilson gained a lot more yards on the ground. So I think it's always weird when you talk about teams that go to the Super Bowl and the NFL, which is the most, the greatest hype machine in American history. It's kind of weird to say that a certain player, a star player, isn't getting enough credit. But I really think that a lot of people don't appreciate just how good Russell Wilson has been.
Well, and I was one of the naysayers. I was one of the guys that thought this guy's just an average quarterback, game manager. But you know what? The game managers that are able to win the games, I'll take those all day long if I can. Obviously the glory that he got to beat the Packers was amazing, but the guy is kind of a game manager who, doesn't. Well, he made 4 interceptions in that game. He threw 4 interceptions, but a couple of those were tipped.
He had a bad game. Let's face it, he had a bad game. But like every great quarterback in history has had bad games, and a couple of the interceptions were good passes that a receiver popped up in the air for an easy interception. It's not like he threw 4 bad interceptions. I would say he threw 2 bad interceptions and 2 that had nothing to do with him. But to come back and win that game, and I'm going to actually differ with you on the game manager thing.
Yeah,
Russell Wilson makes the idea of a game manager is a guy who just converts third down. Converts 3rd down and 4. That's your game manager. 3rd down and 4, he throws a 5-yard pass. Well, you look at Russell Wilson, what he's done throwing the ball downfield with mediocre receivers. He has made a lot of big plays, and other than Percy Harvin, who was an idiot, he doesn't have anybody close to Pro Bowl level in the receiving corps, and yet he makes big play after big play. And if you combine his rushing yardage to his passing yardage, and then factor in the Packer game was an aberration. Other than that Packer game, he's also been exceptional as a pro in limiting turnovers. When you talk about a guy who's creating tons of big plays and limiting turnovers and winning games, I think that's more than game managing.
Well, but to me, he's still not an elite quarterback in the NFL. Not if you look at
I disagree.
Not a Tom Brady. He's certainly not an Aaron Rodgers. To me, he's like a B or C level. We could debate all day about it.
Well, listen, if you Brady and Rodgers, I don't know where they're going to end up, but they might be 2 of the 10 greatest to ever play the game. Maybe even 2 of the 6 greatest to ever play the game by the time they're done. So if you're telling me that Russell Wilson isn't one of the 6 greatest quarterbacks of all time, that doesn't mean to me he's a game manager. I think he's a top. If you want to look around the NFL, let's put it this way: how many quarterbacks would you clearly take over Russell Wilson? Aaron Rodgers, yes. Tom Brady, in terms of cumulative achievement, of course. But Tom Brady today, Would you rather have a Tom Brady who might be a year or two from decline, or would you rather have Russell Wilson in his third year? I think I'd pick Russell Wilson. Peyton Manning, same thing. Of course, Peyton Manning has had a better career, but would you want him right now with a bad arm and all beat up? I don't think so. So far, Rodgers. Who else?
I still think he's a B-level quarterback.
Nope, he's an A-level quarterback. That's my whole point, though.
I know it is. So
you really have to
yeah.
break down the numbers and look at what he's working with, and factor the rushing totals into the overall quarterback rating, and all of a sudden he ranks way up there.
Okay, so I'm guessing, and we don't even have to jump into this yet, but then I'm guessing that you and I are picking different teams for the Super Bowl to see who wins.
I don't think so.
Really?
No. I think that I like the, just sheer personalities.
Yeah.
If I wanted to be unobjective about this, I would be rooting for the Seahawks. I really like Pete Carroll. I really like Darrell Bevell. I like the fact that it's a loose group, that they don't try to mute their players. They tell their players to be themselves. There's a ton of personality there. Sometimes it's brashness, but that doesn't bother me. I kind of like that. They don't try to manage perception. They just kind of are who they are. I love the way they play. I like Seattle. I like the seafoam green uniforms. I like everything about the Seahawks. I do. I think it's so cool. I mean, the Patriots, we're the Patriots. We must wear red, white, and blue, but maybe a little silver too. I mean, it looks like the Patriots uniforms look like somebody's bad idea of what marketing should be in America, And the Seahawks we're going to wear something that makes it look like we just climbed out of Puget Sound, So I love the Seahawks. I think the Seahawks might be a better team than the Patriots, but the NFL is not about, and believe me, this is why I miss on a lot of NFL picks. The NFL week to week is not about who the better team is. It's about how the matchups work. And I think you look at Seattle, they have two limitations on defense. Number one is you can run the ball up the middle against them.
Yeah.
Kevin Williams ain't what he used to be. And I think LeGarrette Blount will be running the ball up the middle against them. But even bigger, they are the third worst team in the NFL at defending the tight end. They do a great job on the outside receivers. They do not do a very good job against the tight end, and Gronkowski is by far the best tight end in the NFL.
I agree with you there. I think Gronkowski is going to have a hell of a Super Bowl.
Yep. Well, one of two things is going to happen. Either Gronkowski's going to have a monster game, or the Seahawks are going to have to expend so much manpower containing him that other people are going to be wide open and Brady will tear them up. Seahawks have a great defense, but I don't like the matchup for them.
Yeah, and I'm with you in the that I really want Seattle to win. I like Pete Carroll. I like the fact that we're talking about Seattle, which is a kind of comparable to a Viking type of market in many ways. It's not a huge city like the Twin Cities are not as I don't know do you know what market rank Seattle is?
I don't.
I'm guessing they're right around this.
It's a big city. A, it's a big city. B, it's a pretty affluent city. C, it also has its own region. Where the Vikings, you got Packers on the left. You got Chicago right there. Viking land obviously extends a little bit west, maybe up into Winnipeg. But it's not a small area. But Seattle. They kind of have Portland. They kind of have Canada. They kind of have northern, all the way up to Northern California. I would say is kind of Seahawk land. So I really feel like I don't know how that breaks down in terms of the size of the market, but it really feels like a regional team.
Yeah, I'd love to see them win it, but I just see the Patriots pulling it together and winning the game. If I had to put money on it, I'm not a gambler, but if I had to put money on it, I'd put Patriots.
And let me bring up a point here too, because we always talk about predictions and who's going to win the. And I just got to remind people, we have no idea, and neither do the players or the coach. And whoever picks it will not necessarily have been right. If you picked the Bills to beat the Giants in Super Bowl, whatever it was, down in Tampa in 1991, well, the Bills lined up for a 40-yard field goal or whatever it was and just missed it. Did you really nail that pick? So often one fluke play changes the outcome of the game. and then the people who pick that supposedly correctly get to crow about it. Well, you didn't really nail it. I mean, it's one. If today I say the Patriots are going to win 45-12, and LeGarrette Blount is going to rush for 200 yards, 3 touchdowns, and all that comes true. Well, okay, then I would say I nailed it, right?
Yeah.
If I say that the Patriots are going to win 45-12, and they find a way to do that with like 4 interception returns, well, I didn't really pick it, did I?
No, I agree with you there. Everybody tries to prognosticate, and it's like, look, go with as much logic as you can, but don't try to give me a final score and everything. Come on. I mean, who knows?
But it's fine to do it. Just don't take it seriously.
Yeah. Well, I'll last year. I mean, did you really think Seattle was going to beat Denver last year?
No,
I didn't either.
I thought that I really just. And part of it is my sports writer brain, which is always hoping for the great story.
Yeah.
I really thought that was going to be Peyton Manning's kind of crowning achievement.
Was
to take that team after the injury, after being released by the Colts, and to go beat the Seahawks. And as much as as highly as I thought of the Seahawks, I just didn't think that they're. I just didn't feel like they could cover all of the Broncos' weapons. And once again, talk about unpredictability. Where that game changed. The first third down, Peyton Manning throws a pass over the middle to Demaryius Thomas, who's one of the best run-after-the-catch receivers in the NFL, and Cam Chancellor comes up and flattens him, just sends him flying. That was the game. That was the Seahawks proving that you can't do what you usually do against other teams against us, and, really, the Seahawks dominated from then on.
Well, we certainly know, living here in Minnesota, that when the momentum changes, the game is over. At least that's the way it is with Minnesota sports. But I think the same thing happened with Denver, as you said. I really wonder if Peyton's got much more than a year left in him.
I'm this way. I bet he has a good half year left in him. I bet
that's what he had this year. He had about 70% this year.
Well, I mean, I'm not even being facetious. This year he was great until he had that injury.
Yeah.
I think at San Diego. And he was never the same after that. He could not, and whether it was purely arm strength or it was a core or a thigh injury that kept him from pushing off and generating velocity, he could not throw the ball downfield anymore. And and while he never had the strongest arm, he could get the ball downfield with great precision or in great touch, great feel. He could not do it. I mean, that was a bad Colts team that beat the crap out of him. Just by taking away the easy throws and making him throw it down the field. So I wouldn't be surprised if Peyton, if he wants to play again next year, and it looks like he does, I wouldn't be surprised if he gets himself back in great shape, rehabs his injuries, goes to camp feeling good, and starts the season well. I wouldn't be surprised by that at all. But I would also expect that sometime during that year he's going to take another hit, and once again he's going to be a guy with a pop-gun arm who just can't move the offense.
Well, and he loves to compete. That's the thing, is I think just like a Brett Favre type of character, that I don't see Manning retiring and coming back necessarily, but I think there's a guy who's going to have a big issue once he's done competing.
Well, I mean, I think he will certainly miss the game. I think he loves it, but I also think he's one of those guys who's just driven to be a success in whatever he does. So whether it's broadcasting or business, I mean, I think he's the kind of guy who he could be the next John Elway, the next quarterback to run an NFL team. He could be somebody who finds a way to be an owner. He could be, if he wants to be a media guy, he'll probably be the best at that. He'd be a hell of a lot better than Troy Aikman, I tell you that.
I could see him and Eli buying a team at some point.
Yeah, I mean, look at how much money he's made and put away through all the endorsements in addition to the salaries he's made. I think he's in a position to do something big if he wants. I just get the sense that's who he wants to be.
So I don't know if you want to keep going with the Super Bowl talk or maybe transition into a little Minnesota sports, but I wanted to ask you another question. So Marshawn Lynch, outside of this year, where do you think he's going next year?
That's a great question, because there were a lot of rumors midway through this year that the Seahawks were preparing to trade or dump Marshawn Lynch, and that Robert Turbin or Michael, Christine Michael was going to be the next Marshawn Lynch. But tell you what, this offense, this team in so many ways, at least emotionally, is built around Marshawn Lynch. I mean, the way he runs, the way he batters defense, the way he wears people down. I just don't think it's the same team without him. And I'm guessing that they're having that conversation internally right now too. Okay, well, it's logical to get rid of an older back. It's logical to not pay an older back, but do you really think this offense functions the same way with Robert Turbin or Christine Michael? Christine Michael's a really powerful young back. He's got a chance to be really good, but you go to 2 Super Bowls with this guy. Do you really cut him loose at this point? I don't know. The other interesting factor is that they're going to have to start saving up to pay Russell Wilson, because when his rookie contract's up, he's going to be their franchise guy, and he's going to get paid like a franchise guy. And can you afford to have them both? I don't know.
Well, and the other thought is that if I have a feeling that Peterson's going to be coming back to the Vikings next year, based on what I've heard through the grapevine. I don't know if you agree with that or not, but if he doesn't, would the Vikings make a move for Lynch?
That's a really interesting one, because I think. Well, to answer your first question, I know the Vikings would like it if Peterson came back. The 2 unknown factors here. Number 1. Are they willing to pay him what he wants to be paid? And number 2, does Adrian want to come back? And does he want to come back for less than what his contract states? I mean, no matter how much the Vikings talk about wanting him back, they're either going to, A, have to way overpay him, which has plenty of ramifications, or B, they're going to have to make him an offer that he doesn't find insulting and that makes him want to come back. I don't know. I still think there are a lot of ways Adrian could end up not back with the Vikings. And my pet conspiracy theory all along has been that Jerry Jones wants Adrian Peterson. Adrian Peterson wants to play in Texas. Jerry Jones is willing and able to pay named players more than most owners are. And to be blunt, Adrian Peterson, would be going to a state that views child discipline much differently than we in Minnesota do.
Oh. That's true. I lived there for a little while, and they still used paddles on high school students. I mean, seriously.
If Adrian Peterson returns to the Vikings, then he's going to have to deal with some protests. If he goes to the Texans, they'll hold a parade.
I know. It's just part of the deal. I played football there in 8th grade, and most of the guys I played with were about 2 years older than I was in my same grade. I'm not kidding.
And one of the most fascinating developments of the whole Adrian Peterson saga to me was the fact that I had. In fact, I talked to Master Tesfasian about this on a recent podcast.
Yeah.
He lives in Irving, Texas, and his father was a strict disciplinarian, and used the belt and things on him. And another guy in the Dallas area, Clarence Hill, who covers the Cowboys for the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, has done it for a long time. Those 2 guys and a couple other people I saw, sports writers, either living in or born in the South, ended up, after reading all the psychological stuff about what it does to a child to be physically disciplined, and the fact that it doesn't make them any more compliant than timeouts or other forms of punishment, and it can be severely damaging. It can lead to a life of crime. It can lead to social what's the word I'm looking for? Antisocial behavior.
Oh yeah.
If you read all that stuff, and a lot of these people did, and end up coming out and saying, "Man, I was wrong about this. I shouldn't have physically disciplined my children. Nobody should have to go through that. I didn't realize any of that until us came out." So in a way, the Adrian Peterson thing, could end up bringing some good to the world. But still, that being said, Adrian would face far fewer protests in Dallas than up here.
Yeah, I personally would like to see him move on. I think it's time for him to move on, and I'm so tired of between Inflatorgate and Peterson and Ray Rice and everything else. I enjoy the NFL. I've told you I'm a homer, so I'm a little biased, but I really don't want drama coming into next season. I really like Teddy Bridgewater. I'd love to see him grow and develop. I think he did some good work this year, but he needs a really solid back behind him. There's always going to be the people that say this is a quarterback's league now, but you got to look at it and say, well, but look at the Seahawks. And the Patriots have a good back, and it's still an important position in football.
Well, it really, the interesting thing is that we had reached a point where almost every league team in the NFL was saying that running backs aren't that important. And to me, that's another reason this is a fascinating Super Bowl. There's so many contrasts between these two teams, and that's a prime one. Pete Carroll traded for Marshawn Lynch.
Yep.
To build his offense around Marshawn Lynch. So he valued the running back. He valued the powerhouse running back who could punish defenses, wear down defenses, control the ball. And Belichick has done the opposite.
Yep.
He's never, he's only spent one high draft pick on a running back, and it was Lawrence Maroney, and he was there for about 2 years before they got rid of him. Otherwise, LeGarrette Blount was, not only did the Steelers cut him, every team passed on him on waivers. 32 teams passed on him on waivers, and finally the Patriots, after he cleared waivers, the Patriots went and negotiated with him and got him in for the rest of the season. And in their victory over the Ravens, he carried 3 times for 1 yard. And then all of a sudden, because this is the way Bill Belichick does things, he decided the game plan against the Colts should be to run it down their throats. All of a sudden, LeGarrette Blount ends up with this monster game. Well, LeGarrette Blount was available to every team in the NFL, and nobody other than the Patriots really wanted him. They have Shane Vereen, who's just kind of a role-playing, pass-catching back.
Yeah.
They had Jonas Gray, who, when the game plan against the Colts the first time around was run down the throats, Jonas Gray ended up with the big yards, and then Belichick barely used him the rest of the season after he rushed for 200 yards and 3 touchdowns. So, you can make either. There's support for either argument. The Seahawks would tell you got to have the powerhouse back, and Bill Belichick would say, "Give me any idiot, and I'll win with him."
Absolutely. I want to talk to you a little bit more about Belichick in just a second, but just let's break in here for just a second and say this is the Jim Souhan Show, Souhan Unfiltered. You can find it at SouhanUnfiltered.com. We're also on iTunes and Spreaker, and pretty easy. Just Google search the show at this point, and you're going to come up with the episodes. You're going to be able to hear a lot of different interviews from different characters, and the nice thing about Jim's show is he asks some questions that a lot of other people won't, whether it's Terry Ryan from the Twins or Gary Lewis from the Jayhawks. So many different characters that come on that show, and it's just very fun to listen to. So you can find Jim if you want to actually go out and see the show done live. You can see it at Kieran's Irish Pub or the local Irish Pub. We rotate Wednesdays on that, and we always kind of pre-promote the upcoming day of the week. And I guess we're going to be looking at some Mondays as well coming up soon. And then we just are able to announce that O'Gara's Irish Pub in St. Paul is going to be having Jim Souhan on Fridays coming up soon. And then you're going to be playing a little gig after that.
Yeah, I got to figure out what the name of my band is. We were the Media Jackals last time around, but that lineup kind of dissolved. And I know our drummer has come up with a logo that calls us the Paper Boys, so I think that's what we might be. There's no way Paperboy hasn't been used yet. I know. That was my reaction too.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll stay with Media Jackals. I don't know.
I kind of like Media Jackals.
Yeah, and just to finish your thought there, so the idea is that I would do my podcast on Friday at O'Gara's at like 5 to 6. Then say 7:30 to 9, somewhere in that ballpark, my band would play. We're a cover band. We play some stuff you have heard, some stuff that you probably don't realize you've heard, but you'll recognize it when we play it. So we just have a lot of fun, play a lot of high energy rock and roll type stuff. And then at 9:30, if I'm correct, our live karaoke band starts, and you can get up on stage with a live band and rock and roll with them.
Yeah, you guys are going to warm them up. So I've actually heard you and Carlos play your 2-man set, and I absolutely love the music choices you guys make. So it's just it's a fun
honestly,
band.
Full band is way better than the acoustic stuff. Full band, we've been the acoustic thing we kind of just did for fun, but the full band stuff we've been working on. We've been practicing a lot, and we've worked up a pretty good set list. I
think you had to have like 100 rehearsals because I was talking to your daughter, and she's like, "They're not ready yet. They're not ready yet."
Well, you don't want to. The first time you play live, let's put it bluntly, you don't want to suck.
No, you don't want to suck because they don't come back the second week, and
exactly.
When you're trying to build something and grow it, it kind of helps to put out a good first product. So we're thankful for our sponsors of Jim's show. More are coming soon. But I had somebody say to me, "Do you only know Irish people or what?" Because between some of the people on our network as well as the sponsors, I'm like, well, I come from Irish descent. Jim does. And we just hired Brian Turner, BT, formerly of Cities 97, currently with Go 96. He's going to be on the network and doing a food show with his daughter Lydia. And in between several different people on the network, we're going to be doing the Southside Music Sessions. So I'm really looking forward to that. It'd be fun, Jim, to have your band, whatever you're gonna name it, on with that as well. But the idea is for different bands to pop by and do anywhere from a few songs to maybe an hour of live streaming music and potentially even live video streaming as well.
Yeah, I can't wait for that. That's the cool thing is the network has the house now with the studio upstairs and the living room where bands can play. I mean, I'm looking for. I think I'm just gonna get a sleeper soap, just stay there.
Yeah. Somebody said to me today, I was on somebody else's podcast that's not on our network yet, but hopefully we'll be joining soon. And they said, did you factor in the times where you are going to piss off your wife and you need a place to stay? I said, this is the nicest doghouse I think you could ever be in. So, yeah, I think we'll either get the Murphy bed or the sleeper sofa or something over here. So the other thing is just watching the ball game over here. I'm already thinking about bringing the big screen over here and maybe watching the Super Bowl from right here at the Southside Studios.
I can get chip crumbs all over your floor, all over my floor.
Exactly. So what are your thoughts about? I mean, Bill Belichick really has had an amazing career. I know there's people that love him, there's people that hate him, but you do have to admire the guy. I mean, especially when you look at how he started and, failing and essentially being fired from his, some of his first coaching jobs.
Yeah, well, he's fascinating. To me, it's so interesting, having spent a career in sports media, how so often people want to turn every argument into an either-or argument.
Yeah.
Is he a cheater or is he a genius? Well, it's both.
Yeah.
It's so often the answer is both.
Yeah.
Listen, he is a genius, and if a genius has been caught doing something illicit twice in a 10, 15-year period, that means he probably got away with 80 instances of doing something he probably shouldn't have done or that pushed the line. So does he cheat? Oh, I think if he thinks he can get away with it, yeah, he cheats.
Yep.
Is he a genius? Absolutely. It's not either or. It's both. And it's interesting, too. Mark Craig, our NFL writer at The Strip, he covered Belichick in Cleveland. And, he offers a great perspective, and I've seen this on documentaries. I've talked to other people I know in the Cleveland market. Belichick was hated in Cleveland for a lot of reasons. Number one, he benched Bernie Kosar. Now,
yeah.
Bernie Kosar had to be benched at that point. He could barely move. But he was the Cleveland legend. He was the favorite guy in Cleveland, so Belichick became the devil for benching Bernie. Then Belichick became the devil because he was affiliated with the ownership group that moved Cleveland in the dark of night to Baltimore. But if you go back and look at it, Belichick took over a terrible organization and had them headed in the right direction. He had turned that into a difficult team to play. Didn't have many stars, but they were well coached. They were tough, and they were on their way someplace. But then the move to Baltimore blew everything up, and he gets fired, and he just another guy. And then the Patriots hire him, and he starts building them up. And then what we don't know, and this is kind of the great test of NFL coaches. What we don't know is how good would Bill Belichick have been if he hadn't lucked into Tom Brady. That's what you can. And that's why when I rate all-time NFL coaches, I put Joe Gibbs and Bill Parcells up there as high as anybody, because Parcells won with Phil Simmons, but he also won one with Jeff Hostetler, beating what seemed to be a far superior team in the great Buffalo Bills. Before the Bills were embarrassed by their other Super Bowl losses, they looked like a powerhouse. So Parcells won it with Sims, but he also won with Hostetler. Joe Gibbs won 3 Super Bowls with 3 different non-Hall of Fame quarterbacks, with the first black quarterback to ever win a Super Bowl, and with 3 different non-Hall of Fame running backs. He could take anybody and go win a Super Bowl. That to me is the great test. So Belichick, he's great, but we don't. It's always hard to tell how great because he's never had to do it with something other than a Hall of Fame quarterback.
Yeah, it's one of those things that if Brady retires at some point, the next day Bill Belichick should retire or go someplace else.
Yeah, but the flip side of that is if you ever won a Super Bowl with Jimmy Garoppolo, then we just say, okay, you're the greatest coach of all time.
Yeah, I just don't know if I'd want to take that risk. Do you leave a legacy or do you take the big chance?
I think Belichick's ego is big enough that he thinks he can win with other guys.
That's what happens all the time when you're dealing with talent. And you couldn't find a guy more different than Pete Carroll. And although you look at Pete Carroll's track record, and here's another guy who has cheated and who is a genius, in my opinion. He cheated at the college level with USC, and what happens after that? He goes on to Seattle and gets a Super Bowl ring.
Absolutely. And that's the interesting thing about the cheating debate, whether it's steroids, whether it's taking greenies, whether it's corking your bat, whether it's pine tar, whether it's Spygate or Deflategate or whatever. You know, everybody who's really good in sports is looking for an advantage. And most people in sports will push up to a certain line. And that's the differentiating point, is how far are you willing to push? Where are you going to draw that line? And I think a lot of people say, you know, I think there are a certain number of athletes and coaches who say, okay, I will push it up to the point where if I get caught, I would still have some deniability, right?
Yeah.
And I think guys like Belichick and even Carroll at USC, there's a certain arrogance there. They feel bulletproof to a certain extent, or they're desperate, and they're willing to go a little bit farther past that line. But you're right, Carroll cheated at USC. I think most highly successful coaches in Southern California are going to cheat. And then he leaves and he gets the big payday in Seattle. And if he wasn't such a bubbly, fun, personable guy, he would probably have a bad reputation because of the USC thing. But because it's Pete Carroll and he's fun to be around and he's jovial and he tells jokes and his players love him, you tend to be forgiving with him.
Absolutely. So we need to wrap things up here for today. Now, we're going to be talking again on Sunday morning, right?
Yeah, so whatever you like.
We got to leave a few secrets out there, I think, for Sunday morning. Any closing thoughts from Phoenix and Super Bowl HQ?
Not every Super Bowl is great to cover. Not every Super Bowl is a good game. You know, there are boring teams in Super Bowls. There are boring Super Bowl games. This really feels different to me. You have the Seahawks trying to win 2 in a row, which is very rarely done. You have the Patriots trying to win a 4th with the same coach and quarterback, which is very rarely done. You have the added intrigue of whatever happened to those footballs on the Patriots sideline. You have Brady coming toward the end of his career. Not there yet, but toward the end of his career. You have, and on the other side, you have the Seahawks that not only have a chance to win 2 in a row, but have a chance to win 2 in a row with a third-year quarterback, which would, and a very young roster, and a roster where they really haven't been forced to pay a lot of guys yet. So, you have 2 different teams that in some way could start making claims toward having some kind of a dynasty if they win. And you also, to me, have 2 really entertaining teams. I mean, the Patriots could come out and throw it 50 times, or they could come out and run it 50 times. They could go with a 5-man line, or they could play 8 defensive backs. You just don't know what they're going to do. And the Seahawks, I think you know what they're going to do. You just don't know how well it's going to work.
Yeah, I think you got 2 great coaches, and anything could happen in this game. So it should be a Super Bowl worth watching. I'm really looking forward to it. So you're listening to Jim Souhan all the way from Phoenix, Arizona, live at the Super Bowl. This is Souhan Unfiltered. The show will be posted here shortly at SouhanUnfiltered.com. You can also get it on iTunes. My name is Sean Bernard from the Alive and Social Network. Jim, we will talk to you Sunday morning.
Sounds good. Thanks, Sean.
All right. Thanks so much.